Hello, I'm Reverend Scott Wipperman, pastor here at First Presbyterian Church in Helena, Montana, and we welcome you to our worship service today. I'd like you to know that regardless of who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, you're welcome here at First Presbyterian Church. And our epistle reading today comes from Romans chapter 13, beginning in verse 11. And Paul says, "And do this, understanding the present time, the hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over, the day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us behave decently as in the daytime, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension and jealousy. Rather, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ, and do not think about how to gratify the desires of the flesh." And from the gospel reading, from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, beginning with verse 36. "But about that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. They knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the handmill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house been broken into. So you must also be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him." The word of the Lord. Well, the Apostle John tells us in the 3rd verse of the very first chapter of his gospel that Jesus Christ made all things. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. So, having been made, do you want to meet your Maker? This is the line that Walter Matthau, a.k.a. Mr. Wilson, said to Dennis the Menace, followed quickly by, "I can arrange it." But are you expecting to meet your Maker anytime soon? Not in Walter Matthau's sense, but in the impersonal sense of an encounter with Jesus Christ. The texts today are about the second coming of Christ. It's something that we believe in. Paul thought it would be very soon in many of his letters to churches. But it's been about 2,000 years, right? And the second coming hasn't happened yet. Our gut tells us that the odds aren't good that it's going to happen tomorrow, or the day after that, or even before Christmas, or maybe Epiphany. But in the movie, The Adjustment Bureau, and yes, I have to refer to movies, right. But in the movie, The Adjustment Bureau, there's the chairman, and the chairman has a plan for the world. But sometimes we humans don't necessarily follow the plan. So there are the Adjustment Bureau agents. These agents look just like humans, except they have some powers above and beyond ours, and they help guide us to follow the chairman's plan. They may do this by slightly influencing how we think, so that we'll come to a decision that's in concordance with the plan. Or they may do this by arranging a serendipitous encounter that will lead us along the plan, or maybe preventing a chance encounter that would deviate us from the plan. And Matt Damon is a rising political star. The plan, the chairman's plan, has for him to become a prominent politician, not just a congressman, not just a senator, but all the way up to the president. Matt Damon, through an unplanned coincidence, one that the agents didn't misdirect, unfortunately discovers the presence of these agents of the Adjustment Bureau. And they swear him to secrecy. If he says anything about their being, they'll erase his memory, erase his mind. But the trouble is, through another chance encounter, Matt Damon runs into Emily Hunt, and they fall in love. And this isn't part of the chairman's plan. And so the Adjustment Bureau agents work to separate Matt Damon and Emily Hunt. But circumstances sometimes do a weird thing. And sometime later, Emily Hunt and Matt Damon run back into each other, once again, not according to the plan. And the agents are wondering why they're having so much trouble keeping these two people apart when circumstances seem to bring them back together in spite of their planning. And what they discover is that a couple versions of the chairman's plan ago, several decades ago, the plan was for these two people to be together. But then the plan changed, and they weren't. And risking all, Matt Damon pursues Emily Hunt. And in the final scenes of the movie, he's being chased down by many of these Adjustment Bureau agents as he's trying to get to the chairman to see if he can change the chairman's plan. And ultimately, they're trapped on top of a roof, he and Emily Hunt, surrounded by one of the head agents and several of his agent henchmen. And it looks like it's the end. And he and Emily Hunt hug. And when they look back up, only one agent is there. It's an agent that had been working with Matt Damon throughout this movie. And they wonder what's happened. And the agent announces that the chairman changed the plan. And now Emily and Matt are to be together. And Matt Damon looks at this agent and says, "Are you the chairman?" And this is the point of me telling you this whole long story. And the agent says, "No, I'm not the chairman. But you've all met the chairman. Everyone has met the chairman. He appears differently to each and every person. And most people don't realize that they've met him. But we've all met him." So, it's been a long time since Christ has been here. The world will meet Christ at the second coming. At least some of the world will, right? Because in our reading today, Jesus said, 2 will be standing in the field and 1 will be taken away. 2 will be grinding at a grindstone. 1 will be there, 1 will be left. And of course, we know that many of the authors that talk about this thing assume that the bad person is taken away, right? I mean, the good people are taken away. Just the bad people are left here on earth. This is what appears in a lot of the popular fiction that has occurred over the last years. But this is a rather Gnostic view of the world, right? Because in this thing, in this, what Jesus says, he says one will be taken away and one will be left. And he says nothing about which one goes and which one stays, right? Now, the Gnostics viewed this world was created by two rogue angels. And so this world was a dirty place, a sinful place. And I think this is where this view that the good person will be taken away and the evil person will be left on this dirty earth. But if you look at Isaiah's text this morning, Isaiah talks about the change that is coming to the world, where swords will be beaten into plowshares, where nations will not train to fight with one another anymore. So maybe it's that the good people are left for this coming great worth, and the bad people are taken away. Who knows? But in the second coming, all will see Christ. But what if the Adjustment Bureau is right? And each of us will meet the chairman, i.e. God, in our life, up close and personal. Are you ready for that encounter with Christ? How would we be prepared for that? Well, Paul gives us some advice that might be good. He tells us to wake up from our slumbers. And this could be a very literal waking up. Or we can suspect that Paul is meaning a more figurative waking up. Waking up from our narrow vision that just encounters us and our very immediate world and what we need to do for our own being. To wake up, to expand our vision, to look out on others and see beyond ourselves. See the needs of others, just not our own. And Jesus gives some advice, even for what might be good there. I mean, Isaiah gives some advice for what would be good to prepare ourselves for meeting Jesus. He talks about beating our swords into plowshares. I think if we do this, Christ would view it as a worthy exercise. And quite literally, that may be what? Taking tanks and turning them into tractors to work the field? Or maybe taking tanks and turning them into road building equipment. Many nations in Africa have no paved streets between their cities. If you want to travel from one city to another city, you're doing it on a dirt road. And during rainy season, that is really problematic. It's tough enough for you to get from one city to another in a passenger vehicle. Just think of the troubles in moving goods on trucks from one city to another on a muddy road. And also kind of literally, we could take our swords and beat them into plowshares, maybe by choosing not to respond to Russia's nuclear saber rattling that it's been doing this fall, but choosing to respond to that by not building up the number of nuclear weapons we have, but reducing the number of nuclear weapons we have. Turning our weapons into plowshares and taking the money that we would save from the building and the maintaining of those weapons and plowing that maybe into the worst performing schools in our nation to help those children have a better education. Or nourishing those who are without proper food so they can develop properly and live fuller lives. Any number of ways that we might plant seeds with that money. Or figuratively, maybe we can prepare best for the Lord by turning our own weapon, our personal weapon, that very, very powerful weapon, our sharp tongue into a plowshare. Maybe we can take that weapon of ours that we use to intimidate, to put down, to despise, to try to lift ourselves up by cutting others apart. Take that weapon and turn it into a tool that uplifts, that affirms, that encourages. If we do that, maybe we'd be prepared for when we meet Christ. Because the second coming could be tomorrow. Okay, odds aren't great, but it could be. But if we do have a personal, intimate, private encounter with Christ, or maybe more than one, that could be tomorrow. That could be before Christmas. Are we prepared? So, Christ was speaking to people of his time, speaking of the second coming, saying that the coming of the Son of Man would be like Noah in the coming of the flood. People were going about their everyday business, eating and drinking and marrying and preparing for marriage, and wham, a flood shows up. No one knew it. No one expected it. And so it was with Christ's entry into this world. People were eating and drinking, farming. They were complaining about the size of government in this inane requirement to have to go back to the town of our birth to be counted. And Jesus was born. God came to earth in a small, out-of-the-way town. King Herod and all of his advisors didn't know of this. The people in Bethlehem even, they were just looking for a room. They didn't realize that something was about to happen. And wham! God came into this earth in a human form. And you shall call him Wonderful Counselor. He will teach us his ways, that we might walk in his paths. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. For the wonderful Counselor has come. And the radical message of this Advent season is that divine enters and assumes the mundane. Right in the middle of their eating and drinking and marrying and working in the field, Christ invaded the mundane of 0 AD. And right in the middle of our doing laundry and going to work and watching the game and searching on Amazon.com for that present, nothing is off limits for the Lord's arrival. So despite all the catastrophic language in recent days, you'll notice that none of it has to do with Jesus' judgment and redemption. Most of the cries of doom bring with them corresponding admonishments to protect ourselves, right? We're told that the market's going to crash, so protect your investments. We're told this or that is going to happen, so we need to protect ourselves. But the radical message of Advent is that God is solidly in control. Despite what we hear about catastrophes, despite our best efforts to manipulate God's plan and God's message, or maybe the chairman's plan. So in the middle of our mundane, the wonderful Counselor walks right into our lives and urges us to see the light. And when we no longer, or for some reason, can't see the light, Then he says, put on the light's armor. We are counseled by this wonderful counselor to be alert to any flicker of justice or kindness or humility, and that we might illuminate it with the light that we have. We're counseled that the time is always right to do the right thing. We're counseled to be as honest as our sinful selves will allow us to be as we walk through this life, looking toward the interest of others, those others in the field along with us, caring for the vulnerable, strengthening the faint-hearted, upholding the weak. The wonderful counselor beckons us to beat our weapons, whatever they may be, both our corporate weapons and our personal weapons, to beat those into plowshares for planting seeds, seeds that will bring about something desirable that we wish. We are counseled to love one another, even when that other is someone that we count as an enemy. So do you want to meet your Maker? Yes, not in the Walter Matthau sense, but in the sense of having an encounter with your Maker. Are you ready for an encounter with your Maker? Advent means coming. We've entered a season of anticipation, of anticipating the coming of Christ. We don't know the day or the hour when we and the rest of the world will meet Christ at the second coming. Just as those that were in Bethlehem in Israel didn't know the day of the hour of Christ's first coming. And we may not know the day or the hour of our own individual, personal, private encounter with Jesus Christ, with the chairman. But we believe that the day is coming when our past, marred by our wrongdoing, will be bathed in the warm light of God, God's truthful grace. Not that we deserve it, but because God chooses to do that. We believe that the freedom will come, freedom from half-truths and downright lies, that it will arrive. Can we accept that? Can we accept the revelation of such honesty and straightforwardness? If these are the gifts we are to be looking out for, if these are the gifts that we are to anticipate, that we are to welcome and embrace when they show up, could this Advent, 2016, be the one where we participate in these gifts partially until they come into this world fully, made fully manifest on the day and the time of God's choosing? Advent. The wonderful counselor is coming into our very own mundane world to bring it and us alive. Hallelujah.